Welcome back to the Student Hub Live. In this session, we're going to look at creative note-taking. And I'm joined by Jay Rickson, who's a senior manager in the Open University's Curriculum Innovation team, part of the Office of the Pro-Vice-Chancellor Students. That sounds very important, Jay, so I'm not going to ask you about that. I'm going to ask you about creative note-taking, because taking notes is something that all OU students will need to do. And you've been looking at various different ways, so I'm hoping that you can tell us about them. Yeah. And also, I'm hoping that at home, well, you don't have to take notes, but you can, and if you'd like to send them to us, we'll send you something back, which HJ will tell you about in the chat. But we'd like to know, do you currently take notes day to day? Like, as part of your job, whether that's a shopping list or to-do list or any sort of thing, are you in the habit of taking notes? And if you do take notes, how do you take these? That word cloud needs 3 things in there, otherwise your results won't submit. So let us know if you do take them, how you do them. And also, do you like experimenting with note-taking? Just click on the option that applies to you there, and we'll hear the results from that very soon. So what's this sketchnoting, Jay?
Well, I've got an example. Can I show it to you?
Yes,
fantastic.
Please.
So I'm going to grab my first example and just show it to you. So sketchnoting, lots of different definitions out there. It's worth kind of having a bit of a search on the internet, but it's really about something that is a way of capturing ideas visually. There's no necessarily wrong or right way of doing it. It's whatever works for you. So for me, I just think it's about putting my ideas on the page. It's about picking up a pen, drawing something, capturing something. Now, for me, I'm dyslexic, so actually something visual is incredibly helpful for me. And I often find that actually like a little squiggle on a piece of paper helps me remember something. It's kind of like my brain hyperlinks to that thing. So often, sometimes in meetings, I find myself doodling, which is a form of sketchnoting. Just annotating maybe a little bit of a text that I've written down. I find myself just making a bit of a kind of a squiggle, those sorts of things. So sketchnoting is lots of different images, icons all put together, lots of different things about banners, linking, calling out lines. So on this particular example I've done, you might not be able to see some of the details and some of the words, but actually it's about the overall image. And most importantly, it's not about the art. It's not about being a brilliant artist. And it's not about being a perfectionist, which I think is really important. And so your sketch note drawing and my sketch note drawing will be different. And actually that's absolutely fine because it is about what works for you, and how you lay it out, how you present it is totally great as well. Because I think you were saying before, you like to draw on recycled material or like kind of paper that isn't very precious. And I think it's also trying to say, these don't have to be precious, they don't have to be perfect. It's what works for you to help you remember maybe that assignment, remember that meeting. So for me, when I go to conferences, sometimes that's when I start drawing and sketchnoting and mind mapping as well, because it just helps me remember the talk. I find that I remember what's being said much better if I can connect my brain to my hand and just do some drawing.
Because sometimes I try and write things, like if I'm at a conference and someone's saying something really complicated or I don't really get that. So I try and write notes to try and get a sense of the argument. But very often I wouldn't remember what those notes were. And you had an instance where somebody was doing just that sort of approach at a conference and you'd been doing the sketchnoting. What were the differences when they asked you like about something and you were able to recall it quite vividly, weren't you?
I was actually. And I think for me, I'm very visual, which isn't a surprise because I really like this thing. But so I'm very visual. So actually, again, I think it's just whatever that symbol that I've drawn that meant something to me. So, for example, I went to a conference not long ago and they were using a beach ball as a bit of an analogy for something really random, but hey, I remembered it, it worked.
And easy to draw.
Sort of easy to draw. And actually, it's interesting, a colleague asked me about it. And I said, hang on a minute, I know exactly what you're talking about. And I got out my mind map of the conference that I'd done, and there was this squiggle that didn't really look like a beach ball, but I knew it was a beach ball. So I could tell exactly the same story, and it was fantastic, actually. So again, it might look different from yours to mine to somebody else, but actually that's not, it's about what it does for you that's really important.
Because I'm looking at these things, and some of them, like I do, like I use clouds for ideas and I use boxes for things that are more categorical. And without having my own code, I just know I do that. Like one line means emphasis, two lines is something different. So I sort of have started to sort of get some of these, I guess, ways of doing things. But I really like the sort of spider diagram. Those often work really nicely. And what's interesting here here is, I guess, the relationship between stuff. So you started off, where did you start off on the side?
Interesting. I started in the corner, and I think I get freer as I go through the document.
Because I can never commit to starting in the middle. It's just like, I hate it. I hate mind maps for that reason. I'm happy to start on the side.
Well, I think it's funny, and that's where, again, if you do start on a big piece of paper, you can just cut things down to fit.
Yeah. But cut the edge off.
Cut the edge off. That's it.
Square,
That's it. But again, that's why it's so brilliant, because
and sellotape bits on.
And sellotape bits on. I mean, really famous artists have been known to add bits onto their canvases. But yeah, it's not about being a perfectionist. I think you really have to switch your brain off when you're doing this sort of thing, because it's not about making it look amazing. It's about the content.
Yeah.
So again, you can't necessarily see the content of what I've drawn, and this is a particular example that I've been doing, but it's actually, for me, it really helped me remember at this particular conference, and I was wanting to kind of just make some notes on this particular course that I'd like to go on, to kind of just show my line manager. So actually it worked out really well for me to do this.
Yeah, but so in the office of the Pro Vice Chancellor, how does it look then if you turn up with your line manager and say, I've done this drawing about this thing I'd like to go to, or you're in a meeting and people might think, well, hang on, she's doodling here, she's not paying attention.
No, that's a really good point. And I think for me, I have a really lovely line manager who is incredibly, really welcoming, and the same for the team, about maybe ensuring that I can work to my strengths. And as a dyslexic, that is so helpful, and I really value that as an employee. And I think also that's about students knowing when you can work to your strengths and how you can work to your strengths. So I think that's a really brilliant example of finding something that works for me. And finding something that I can do that celebrates who I am, but also the skills that I can bring, because I know that I will remember something that maybe one of my colleagues haven't, because I've got a squiggle and a something that means something to me. So sometimes it's about working to your strengths, which I think is fantastic. But obviously, I do make sure that I behave in meetings. And I guess about being a professional, isn't it? I pick the right moment to do certain things. So yeah, not all meetings would I sit and get my pens out, line up my highlighters. And some I make notes, and sometimes I use technology to help me as well. So often in meetings I'm typing away, and the brilliant thing about some technology now is that you can draw in that as well. So you can make notes and squiggles, so there's so much you can do. And really for these examples I just use kind of a pen and paper and some highlighters.
Okay, so you've shown us some examples. You've got some more here I'd like to see as well, because this whole idea about things, I mean, it is a thing now, and you can look online, and you've got some resources for us that we put on our website as well. So if you'd like to find out more, check out the Student Hub Live website, and Jay's put some brilliant links there to various things like infographics, diagrams as well, and she's also put a sketchnoting handout as well there that you can look at as well in the blog.
Yeah, fantastic. So I've got a kind of a traditional sort of mind map here.
Okay.
So these are the sorts of things that I do tend to use if I go to a conference and I sort of mind map.
That looks more traditional, I guess,
It is much more traditional. And actually this was, so I was reading a paper when I did this, and it was quite a lengthy paper, and I thought, do you know what, if I scan read this, I'm just going to take the information in and I won't retain it.
Yeah.
And so actually when I start, and I did start in the middle.
But sometimes it's not even retaining, it's just understanding.
Yeah, absolutely, no. And so I started in the middle, and then I just kind of had a question that I added to, and then things interlinked from there, and then I could work across the page, and then sometimes I found myself going back to the middle of the article, thinking, actually, what did that mean? And adding a few bits on. And again, as I started to do this, my confidence increased with it. And so I had a few questions that I noted down and things that I wanted to take away to look up further. And so actually that was a really helpful way of doing it. So I probably would do something like this in my kind of work environment, because it was a really helpful way of reading through the paper, retaining the information, because as I wrote it down, I don't know, something else happened in my brain that I remembered it. And so I won't get you to quiz me on this paper, but I think I will remember far more of it than if I had just sat at my desk and scanned it.
Sometimes you need to break things down that are very dense, and that's a way of sometimes forcing you to say, there must be a point here somewhere. There often is. Sometimes there isn't, but it helps you filter out those words so that you can then guess, I guess, what's supporting the key content, and being able to identify and make links between it and recognise processes, which seems important for this paper because you've got lots of arrows.
Yeah, and lots of things led to another and kind of carried on, linking up as I read through the paper. And again, that was kind of quite reassuring for me that I was joining up all the different bits and pieces. So by the time it came to the conclusion, I thought, oh, hang on a minute, I got this.
Yeah, no, exactly. Phew.
yeah.
I don't want to read it. Okay, we asked everyone at home, do you take notes day to day? Now, 61% of you said yes. So what I'd like to know now is, if you do take notes, how do you take these? This is what you had to say. Lists. Okay, lists are great.
Oh, wow.
I love lists. Doodles, OneNote. OneNote's brilliant.
Yeah.
Bullet points in my diary, on the odd sheets on paper,
Yeah.
on PC scribbles, typing into the phone, newspaper, Google Docs, Post-it notes, notes on the phone, planner. Cornell method, that's interesting. I'd like to find out more about that. Pen and paper, keywords, bullet points, notepad or paper, flow diagram, apps. Okay, anyone sharing? This is where we normally, if everyone's not talking about dinner, hopefully they're sharing some various apps that they like.
There's lots of great suggestions for
absolutely.
apps in the chat, isn't there?
Yeah. Lots of people are recommending things, and some people are saying that they don't like mind mapping because it's too formal. However, what works for different people works. Some people mentioning sticky notes. The only problem there, they note, is that once you've got enough sticky notes on your screen, it's difficult to see your screen. And we've also been chatting about sleeping dogs, and probably best to let them lie.
But I think one great suggestion is from Hayley that as an OU student, you've got access to Office 365,
Yes.
which
yeah.
gives you access
Brilliant.
to OneNote, which is a great tool for mind mapping or creating lists and
Yeah.
taking notes, or putting podcasts or recording on there as well. Jade likes a good list as well, and Samantha definitely likes a list. She said, I write all the lists and edit everything on Post-its.
Yeah. I was going to say,
Yeah.
somebody's just talking about visual learning. Of course, I love visual learning, which is why I've got my listening hat on. But yes, sorry, you were saying.
No, there's some great suggestions for programs as well. So different things like Scapple or Xmind for mind mapping. There's lots of online tools as well, but there's always the normal pen and paper, isn't there?
Absolutely.
To make some
Never be
creative-
afraid to go low tech. The good thing about pen and paper is that you've got complete control over where everything goes. And I say that as a technology student.
But there's lots of great suggestions. So if you have any other suggestions for us of something great you found, or a great tool or program, or just a way you make your notes, we'd love to hear it.
Oh, that's brilliant. We asked
great.
everyone whether they experiment taking notes. The lead proportion was 37%, saying a little depending on the situation. 31% say they like to try different techniques. 26% say no because they haven't thought about it. But only 6% say no, they've got a system and they're sticking with it.
Okay.
Well, I like this idea of this Cornell method, which basically, because most people write too many notes,
Yeah.
and the whole idea with this is that you've got two columns on the right-hand side where you put
Okay.
most of your content, and then you have a column, and on the left-hand side you sort of put the condensed stuff, so the keywords, which really has your clarity, I guess, and you also put things that maybe questions that were unanswered and stuff like that, and then at the bottom you have a short summary. So it's sectioning that
great.
page into those proportions, I guess, so that you can write a lot, but then you can condense it and summarise it. So that's a great thing. I'm going to try that. I like the sound of
I like
that.
the sound of that as well.
Yeah, it's a new thing to try.
Fantastic.
What's another example?
Kind of my last one.
Highlighters,
That is
yeah.
highlights. I kind of really went for it here. So there's highlight, there's Post-it notes, there's kind of a mixture of some sketchnoting stuff and a mixture of mind mapping things here. So this is far more just having a bit of a fun, a bit of a play. So this is about me thinking about the next module I might do. So breaking it down, doing a bit of research, thinking about some of the call outs. So this was a bit of fun really. But again, it's about getting in touch with your stationery geek and really having fun and trying not to be too precious as well, because actually if it's for you, then what does it matter what it looks like, because actually it's about you running through the information, presenting the information.
And could you hang that on the wall to revise from?
Well, I think what was really interesting is that actually, a bit like that method you were just talking about, was it the Cornell method? Yeah. I mean, I think that would be so helpful, wouldn't it, to think of it if almost distilling your TMA, so thinking about these are areas I want to talk about, then I'm going to distill it down and distill it down, and
Or
here's
just
my
cut off
intro.
the summary at the bottom when you get to the revision, but you don't need the rest because you'll have hopefully learned it then. So
I do think this is a really helpful way that actually next time I might have to write a paper for work, or indeed an assignment for me to sit down and think, right, what would be my beginning, what would be my middle, what would be my end, what are some of the things that I know I want to get in there, that I want to reference, that I want to call out. And actually, for me, I probably would think through much more creatively using a pencil and a paper, or kind of something that felt a bit like, recycled material, piece of paper, something that felt non-precious, because actually I think almost in that relaxed state, I might be a bit more creative. I might be feel a bit less pressured to do something as well. So yeah, this was a nice bit of fun, but I really enjoyed kind of getting the markers out, getting the post-it notes out.
Some students colour code things, so they'll have colours for stuff. And I know I used to do that. I used to have like green for definitions, orange for methods. Pink was I remember all this. Pink was for theories, yellow was for the like examples or applications of stuff, and blue was always a bit of a random one for me. And then sometimes I'd find a purple highlighter, which just threw everything out, and they're hard to find, so I could never really rely on the purple highlighter thing. But it was helpful because sometimes I'd like break my notes up and I'd go, oh, this is a really theory-heavy thing here, or this has got loads of definitions, and so if I'm going to write about it, I might need to include all those definitions because they matter. So I'd sort of get a sense, I guess, of things using colour as a proportional guide for myself.
That's a really helpful thing. But interestingly, that you could recite all those things now.
Yeah.
The fact that actually those colours are sort of burnt on your psyche.
I even write them on the highlighters.
that you know what they mean, and actually, at a very quick glance, you could be able to look through your assignment guide or your kind of materials from the module and think, actually, I can pinpoint definitions, I can pinpoint examples. How clever is that? That was a really helpful way of approaching things.
Okay, good. Excellent. Well, there we are. Maybe not that bad then, as I thought I was. We've been showing you various types of note-taking. What are the 3 words that you associate, or 2 words or 1 word? As you know, just put a full stop in if you can't think of 3. What are the words that you associate with this type of note-taking that we've been talking about? Aisha and Simon, have people got other ideas?
I mean, it's gone a bit random,
Well,
for a change.
Tanya had a really good point that she's a bit nervous because it seems like a lot of people all using these different programs in the chat and are quite familiar with them. But actually, when it comes to using all these online programs for notes, it's just something that's a bit extra, and it's something that you might encounter or might find useful along the way with your studying. But if you don't find it useful, or you're not really want to go outside and look at that stuff for now and just focus on what the OU's given you, that's perfectly fine. I started off like that, just pens, paper, and away I was. But as you go along, some people might suggest things that you'd like to try, but don't stress about it at all. The important thing is just the materials provided to you by the OU. If you find something that you'd like, then certainly use it.
And Simon, do those ears make you a better listener?
Well, I mean, it's a weakness of mine, but yeah, no, it's... But sorry, what were you saying?
Oh, no, I can't remember. What are you talking about with everyone at home?
Well, I think we were just, I mean, again, I wanted to sort of echo what HJ was just saying, in that I found that when you were like, doing technology, you have to set up so much software. Every time you start a new module, there's more software. So actually, when it came to note-taking, people make suggestions. I think, oh no, I just don't want to set up another piece of software.
Yeah.
So I would often go old school with my note-taking.
Yeah.
Because that's just one of those things. I think a lot of people love the colour coding. That's coming through. And they're wanting to experiment. And I think that's probably the answer with note-taking, because at the end of the day, it's whatever works for you, isn't it? So, yeah. So there's one person who says they plan to write in all their textbooks. And, of course, the OU has those special margins, the wide margins, just for that. That is a good thing to do. And they're there for you. So, yeah, yes.
But I guess one of the things with note-taking that really strikes me with your thing on micro-credentials is that, it is about a way of walking through the learning. It's not just about necessarily recalling something or capturing things. The note-taking for you is actively helping you to make sense of stuff around you. And that's a really important thing, because sometimes people are thinking, like you're saying, I don't want to take notes like this, or I can't figure it out. Has that evolved then in terms of your professional work and your student work? I mean, did you always take notes like this, or have you sort of learned different things at different moments?
I think I've always lent towards the visual. I think because I'm a very visual person. I think also being dyslexic, actually, I think if I could use visuals sometimes to communicate, that's helped me in the past. So I think I have always lent towards that. But I think the lovely thing about, like you saying, with the acceptance of things like sketchnoting now is that, and mind maps and those sorts of things, is that there's just a little bit more understanding of a way that somebody might work that's different. And so that actually, if I am sitting in a conference and I'm sketchnoting or I'm making a mind map, nobody might be looking over my shoulder going, oh, what is she doing? Actually, most people are looking over my shoulder going, what is she doing?
Yeah, that looks really cool. I wish I could draw like that.
And so actually, I think that's been lovely because I found that I've been able to work in a way that has suited me and worked to my strengths, but has also had a bit more acceptance.
Yeah.
So I suppose also it's about working out in your situation, whether that's your personal life or professional life or as a student, what works for you. Because again, one size does not fit everything. It's got to be something that works for you. But experimenting is worth it.
Yeah.
It really is. Yeah.
No, I've sometimes, when OneNote came out, I was like, oh my goodness, this is amazing. And I was doing it all the time. I had it on my phone, I'd sync it to my computer. I don't use it anymore.
Yeah.
But there was a time when I was collating a lot of stuff that for me, it really, really helped in terms of my note taking. Now I sort of revert back to my things, but very often, like if I have to do something that I'm finding really hard, I might sort of section things out, and that can help me walk through something. But can you tell us a bit, because I wanted to talk about these infographics and diagrams, because the resources that you've given us are really interesting. So what are they, and what can students see from them if they go and look those up?
So the courses, they're free. They're on Open Learn, which is just a brilliant platform for kind of free learning. And I've taken both of these courses. So one is on infographics, and again, infographics.
What's infographics?
Well, let me think if I can get a definition
like
right.
a sentence would be great.
But I suppose an infographic is a very visual piece of information that has got words, has got pictures, and often like diagrams, those sorts of things. And they convey a lot of information in one big kind of hit. But they do say that I guess the combination of the visual and the text is really powerful, and people actually pick up far more information because they're looking at a mixture of visual and the kind of written word than they would if there'd just been lots of written words. So often infographics are really big, they're really catchy, they're very colourful, so instantly I'm really drawn to them. And but at the same time they get used for lots of academic things. So think of an academic poster. So I know in some of our modules our students are asked to design and submit an academic poster. So they're not too dissimilar from that. So this particular course, it goes through all the really great stages of design, but it also goes through the academic approach to designing these posters so that they're not just something that looks pretty, they've got real great content. So that was a fantastic course that I really enjoyed doing. And then one of the other courses is all about different ways of putting visual things down. So it will go through different diagrams, it will go through different ways of recalling information. And it will go through lots of different ways to, different methods, different methodologies, different theories behind things. So, and of course, a lot of these courses are based on modules that we have as well. So it's fantastic learning that is just free. And those sorts of things, I can't stop. I sort of hoover them up.
Yeah, no, they're good. They're good, especially just before a module started. Yes. Right, we asked you what are the words that you associated with this type of note-taking. So let's have a look and see what came to mind. Right, so these are the things that people were reflecting on, Jay. So helping your memory, being unreadable, bullet points, organisation, mind maps, to the point, unacceptable, concise, brainstorming, creative, erratic, to-do deadlines, what works for me, reminder, personal style, visual memory, organisation. So there's lots and lots of things here, some positive and some negative. It's very interesting, some of the words people have put there. Would you like to come back to any of those points?
Well, it's interesting that unacceptable is there.
Yeah.
And it's interesting.
Yeah, you can go
that,
now.
You know, yeah, okay.
You should have watched our session on netiquette.
Yeah, that's it. But at the same time, I totally understand that it's a different way of presenting information, and what works for somebody might not work for somebody else. So whether that's around maybe somebody looking at learning and thinking this doesn't look like learning, or whether that's just somebody in an environment that actually this hasn't been accepted. And I think the lovely thing about education is that we're moving in different directions, and we are acknowledging this way of working. And I think sometimes that's just about people saying, can I do this? Can I try this? So when I came to the Open University, I was kind of quite new into my role, and I had a chance to write a paper or do an infographic, and I was thinking this is quite a process-driven task.
Yeah.
And so I thought, I'm going to be a bit bold here, and I'm going to do an infographic. So I did an infographic, and I sent it off to my boss, and he printed it out, and he was like, Jay, you've been having fun. But what was brilliant about it, and I said, look, I'm really sorry, I'll do a paper. And but actually he said, no, this is brilliant, this is exactly what we needed.
Yeah.
And for me, that was about real acceptance into the role, into the way that I work, into my learning kind of difficulty, which I see as an opportunity. So I really do understand that some people will say, look, in my environment, it'll be unacceptable. But I guess it's about maybe pushing back and saying, well, is it? Is it really? Or maybe just proving that actually this is the way you work, and this is what works for you. So actually, I know if somebody quizzed me, don't do it, on that paper that I read, I think I'd retain a lot more from it because of the way that I made notes about it. So it's an interesting one, but I think more people change the way people think.
Well, also things are changing. I mean, in a lot of assessment now. I mean, some of my students this year, they'll be designing posters.
Amazing.
They'll be writing reflective journals. They'll be doing all sorts of things that they may not think are proper pieces of academic work. But actually, you know, they have great employability skills. And so sometimes things like this might not seem very academic, but are. So it's about challenging those expectations also.
Absolutely.
Brilliant. Well, thank you for showing us all of those. And I hope that people at home go and find those resources. Is it cold over there?
Yeah, that's exactly what this hat. This hat has no purpose apart from just the fact that I'm cold.
Yeah, I'm just.
But we've loved talking about making notes with everyone. So Robin said that she had no issue with writing in her books, which is exactly what I think as well. I started off a bit like Stephanie. She wanted to keep her books really pristine and good, but after a while you just think actually it's really good to write it because then you can see exactly what it relates to. Anne isn't a fan of writing in her books. It's different for everyone. She puts post-it notes, which is a good idea as well. You could use different colours. I know Karen said she brought 2,000 post-it notes, so she's
2,000.
ready. Her room will be covered with her notes.
I think if you need a post-it note,
That's it. She's got some to share.
Yes.
But Hayley had a great comment, which I think is great to sum up everything. And she said, this is what starting module is really for. You learn and get used to what's comfortable for you, and then you'll streamline what works for you when you get to modules that count towards your classification. And I think that's a really good summary of our attitude towards this.
Oh, well, Catherine and Tanya think your hats are getting better and better. So, you know.
Have we been changing hats?
Right. Thank you very much, Jo. That's been fantastic. And it's really opened up, you know, some new potentials. And I think you and I can both go and try that Connell method as well. That sounds really fab.
That's great for me.
Yeah,
I'm going to take that
we've
away.
learned something as well.
Yeah, definitely.
Brilliant. All right, our next session is going to be a welcome from your Students' Association. So we're going to meet Kath and Anka from the association. But we're going to play you a video beforehand. This is another one of our campus tours from our fabulous campus at Milton Keynes. And we're going to show you the language panel, which is in the library. So I'll be back for our live session in just a few minutes.